I'm very surprised at what the Aero 17 was capable of. They gave the CPU a tremendous amount of power. It actually handles an i9 respectably well considering its actual thickness or thinness and overall form factor. And it's not very often that I get to utilize a laptop, check out a laptop where the display itself is pretty much going to dictate how the laptop should be used. So with all that said, let's get into it. This is my in-depth review of Gigabyte's Aero 17.
The Aero 17 uses an all-aluminum chassis weighing in at 5.8 pounds and just 0.8 inches thin. The maximum spec the Aero 17 can carry in our laptop here features the i9-9980HK and the RTX 2070 Max-Q. There's 2 memory DIMM slots total, both are occupied with 8GB DIMMs, 16GB dual channel 2666. For storage, we have 2 M.2 slots. The first features an Intel 760p NVMe, very standard for Gigabyte over the last 12 months. The second slot is empty and it will allow for NVMe or SATA. The network interface card uses the AX1650X and is Wi-Fi 6. The 94 watt-hour battery was good for around 3.5 to 4 hours. Expect an additional 90 minutes once Windows sorts out a bug that's prematurely draining everyone's laptop battery at the moment. Another contributing factor to the lower battery runtime is that display. We have the Ultra HD, that's right, 4K, 100% Adobe RGB. It is Pantone X-Rite calibrated individually from the factory. It came in at 381 nits. It is good for HDR 400, or so they claim. Looks quite lovely compared to the Aero 15 laptop of last year. We have 25 milliseconds of response time on this panel, and I do not recommend it for gaming. However, that Full HD 144Hz that's coming in at 100% standard RGB has 3 milliseconds of response time, and those that are looking to game, if not more so than content create, that's the panel you're going to want to go for. And powering all of this is a relatively small in physical size 230 watt power supply unit. Port selection on the left hand side includes a local area network port, ultra high speed 2 card reader, a USB 3.1, a separate mic and headphone jack, and another USB 3.1. On the right hand side we have a USB 3.1, a 4-lane Thunderbolt 3, a USB-C that will do DisplayPort 1.4 and USB 3.1, an HDMI 2.0, and a power port. The rear features exhaust only, has an Aero badge, and is a little bit more aggressive than previous Aero models. The Windows Precision touchpad is made of glass and features a fingerprint reader for Windows Hello. The full-size keyboard features a numeric pad. It is well lit with per-key RGB, however the secondary keys are not lit. The built-in webcam and microphone are actually located on the keyboard deck and feature a privacy shutter. Have a look and listen. Our 720p webcam and microphone are located at the back of the keyboard deck rather than the bottom of the bezel like we've seen in the past, which means moving the display does not change the angle of the webcam. That can be looked at as good and bad. We do have a privacy shutter here. I wouldn't mind seeing this on a lot more laptops out there, but due to the location of the webcam, keyboard strokes are going to look and sound like this, as well as the maximum fan. Now, the microphone will still pick me up. The quality here is compromised a little bit, as you can clearly hear, but at least it does a decent job of drowning out the fans should you need this kind of webcam while running the laptop at maximum load. The Gigabyte Control Center software is the lifeblood of the Aero series laptops. The CPU has 6 different power profiles, and the GPU has 2 different power profiles activated at the click of a button. The Aero features per-key RGB and is very easy to use, and my favorite part of the whole software suite is the fan control. While we do need the software to control the fans of the Aero in this level of detail, being able to max out the fans or fine-tune them as we see fit is something most manufacturers miss the mark on, and Gigabyte has been nailing it on the Aero for the last 12 months. The Aero 17 is a little bit louder than the Aero 15 of the previous generation at 55 dB. Have a listen. Here's the expected benchmark performance from your Aero 17. We are not doing any tuning of any kind. The Azure AI is turned off, and we have run each benchmark 5 times, taking the middle result for just the overall average performance from benchmarks out of our Aero 17. This should ultimately reflect something similar that you would get on your end. Again, no tuning or anything on my end. Alright, so those are the benchmarks. We do have an overclockable HK CPU on this particular Aero.
However, you got to use third-party software in order to extract those overclocks, and we are already running high wattage and high temperature. All I could get was a little bit over 4,000 points in Cinebench, and it resulted with an instability issue in which I was getting a frequent blue screen of death and some hitching here and there, WHEA rounding errors, all that good stuff that would pretty much insinuate either too high of a clock or too low of a voltage, and that's never a good thing. So I would suggest laying off overclocking on this particular laptop, but a nice little undervolt does go a long way, which I'm going to reveal here shortly. Now, when it comes to the thermal paste application on here, they're not using just a traditional junk paste. We have Thermal Grizzly Hydronaut on the Aero 15 and Aero 17. Now, that's definitely something that was a little bit odd at first to me because Hydronaut typically would insinuate water-cooled desktop type builds, and others have said that Hydronaut is good for longevity. If that's the case, I can get behind that because we want longevity in thermal pastes on laptops. Taking these things apart can be a little bit intimidating for many people out there. And the Hydronaut, if that's indeed what it's doing and what it's there for, right on. Now, from my experience with Hydronaut on this laptop, I can say one really positive thing about it, and that is the core uniformity, the core differential between the hottest of the 8 cores and the coldest of the 8 cores at load was closer than anything that I have ever tested on any laptop ever, whether I had reviewed it on the channel or just tested it on my own for fun. We're talking 2-degree differential. That is liquid metal territory as far as the overall efficiency of that paste as it's spread across all of the cores. Now, I'm hoping that this is a consistent thing across all of the Aero 15s and 17s and not just my review sample. Keep something in mind here. This review sample is pretty beat up. It's been around for several months. It has been around to all of these tech channels before it finally got to me, and it's still holding up remarkably well, and I think that's sort of a good sign. All right, folks, let's proceed.
Frame rate performance of the 2070 Max-Q in the Aero 17, well, it is just as good as you would want it to be. There's no thermal throttling, and it can run wide open to the best of its ability based on the wattage that it is allowed to get. Now, the gameplay that you see here is at full HD. You cannot use this GPU at Ultra HD with these AAA titles, and the 25 millisecond response time of the panel is just not a good gaming experience, but that display was never intended for the gamer first. For that, Gigabyte already makes a display, the Full HD 144Hz, 3 to 5 millisecond panel. That's the one you're going to want to game on should you desire this chassis. That Ultra HD display that we are showcasing in this review is glorious. It is a spectacular content creator's dream laptop display. But everything that you see here, Full HD, frame rate performance is everything that you would expect out of a 2070 Max-Q. Thermal performance is in check, and this is a stock laptop here. Now just pay a little bit of attention to your fan curve, and you are not going to thermal throttle that GPU whatsoever. But those that desire a little bit of my fine-tuning, well, let's have a look and see what happens when we provide those solutions. With the Aero 17 being a thin and light, but still 17-inch laptop, I was very surprised that we were allowed to get this much CPU wattage out of this machine. So the stock thermal and frame rate performance using the Battlefield 5 firing range, get a good heat soak here. You can see in the top left-hand corner we are power limit throttled just as you would expect. We're hitting everything as you would see here on a stock type system. The CPU is going to get near that 90-degree threshold before it thermal throttles, and the GPU will be around 80 degrees Celsius. Now, if you want to go extreme, undervolt that CPU to negative 0.080. It's going to drop the wattage a little bit. Of course, this is going to be very much software dependent, and that GPU at 0.7 volts at around 1350 megahertz will completely neutralize any power limit throttling and have this thing running at the more NVIDIA 2070 Max-Q spec. But if you really want to dial this in, and I've talked about this before, utilizing that same CPU undervolt, but now we can just be on the cusp, on the border of that power limit throttling, just barely in and out of that. 0.75 volts on this particular GPU at 1500 megahertz did just that. And as you can see, our frame rate performance is just as good as it was stock, but thermal performance overall has a slight improvement to it.
How do the speakers sound? The classic chassis style versus the newer Aero 17? Well, I can tell you right now, the highs on this definitely sound a lot more crisp. There may be a bit of a bug with the Nahimic audio in the latest Windows updates, or so I've been told. The potential here should be a lot greater. The bass is stronger, the mids are stronger, the volume, the decibels is a little bit higher, but it just lacks that higher end, which gives this a little bit more of a full and pleasant sound. Have a listen for yourself. I think this is a pretty good 17-inch laptop with very little in the way of identity crisis. I wouldn't mind seeing the ultra high-speed 3 card reader in here, but I do appreciate that we have Windows Hello via fingerprint reader, and the webcam location may not be appealing to some, but I do believe that the shutter is not going to upset anybody. And when it comes to the display, if you are the content creator first, maybe content creator only, well, this is a really nice display with that 4K 100% Adobe RGB. It's plenty bright enough, and if you want to use this, honestly, as a gaming solution first, it's got the CPU chops to push the GPU fast enough to saturate that GPU, get a high level of frame rate, and now that Full HD 144Hz panel makes a lot of sense. And once Windows gets a few things sorted out, I do believe we're going to see an improved audio solution and better battery life, as that does seem to be affecting everyone across the board. All right, folks, that's going to do it. This is my review of the Aero 17. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.